Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again, episode 261, as we go back to the year 2002, covering Luca Turilli's second solo album, Prophet of the Last Eclipse. But before we talk Luca Turilli and all things Italian symphonic power metal, how are you, my friend?
Lovely. And speaking of Italians, I got to have a short chat with our friend Olaf Thorsen, like I had hoped that I would, regarding our chat about Return to Heaven Denied. And I asked him, I said, do you have any idea why the Japanese edition of the album had a different track order? And I said, did you prefer one over the other? I'm clearly dead set on not letting this conversation go to the wayside. He responded, interesting question, but the truth is we actually don't know why the Japanese edition has a different track order.
Wow.
From what I remember, I think they wanted it to be different in order to have it specifically made for their market. I also remember they wanted us to record a special acoustic version of Falling Rain, as you mentioned on the podcast. So I told them that I listened to it in the order and I thought it had a really nice flow to it. And he said, I can only remember that the first time we listened to it, it just sounded really weird to us, especially because we chose the real track list personally, which makes a ton of sense. And he said, especially since, Moonlight was meant to be the first song and Die for Freedom was meant to be the last song. And you had even mentioned in the episode how there's kind of a reprise at the end of Die for Freedom that calls back to Moonlight. So obviously, that makes sense. So, Olaf, we appreciate your info on that one, just to kind of tie a bow on that episode that we did a few weeks ago. But I felt like that tidbit of information was still kind of floating out there, and I was super curious if there was any details about it. But it sounds like it was probably a label decision. I assume, I feel like at the time, like Victor was releasing like every single metal album in Japan at one time. Like it's talk about cornering the market. So I assume it was
with
Victor,
with great bonus tracks at that. But I'm sure we will find a way to weave Labyrinth into the conversation next week. I'm only curious as to how we do it. So that should be interesting. But I'm glad we have an answer, or don't have an answer, but at least we know that no answer exists because we went straight to the horse's mouth there. So that's cool. Before I talk about a pair of albums in the prog genre that really caught my ear this week, I wanted to ask you your thoughts on the new Epica album. And I ask because before we covered their last album on the podcast, I had kind of said to you, more of the same for them. And you thought I was crazy because I know you really liked the last album. And I think that when I really spent more time with it, I came around on it. I certainly enjoyed it. I was wondering what you thought of the new release from them. And I say that because I struggled with this. Again, not that it was bad. I enjoyed the listen, but this was, I think, their 9th album at this point. And I just feel like they're very good and they're in this groove of releasing good albums, but it didn't knock my socks off like when I first heard them 20 years ago or whatnot. Wondering if you had the same experience or if it was something that kind of clicked for you more right away.
I will say I've listened to it twice now, and there are some songs I really, really like. I particularly really like the opening track, Cross the Divide, which was one of the singles, so I think I had more time to listen to it. But when Omega came out in 2021, that album blew me away. I listened to it a ton of times. I think it was my runner-up for album of the year that year. So this new album, A Spiral, is not quite to that level for me, at least not yet. But I plan on going back to it. But I do agree with you. It's not quite hitting me the way, as far as I can remember from, 4 years ago, how I felt about that album. But, it's I feel like it's a little bit more like bouncing around as far as like different types of sounds and types of music and stuff that they're going for here. So I their albums usually are pretty dense. They're usually pretty long. So I'm not gonna make my final judgment based on 2 listens. But I will say, like, as of now, I am preferring Omega, but I definitely plan on going back to it. But I mean, this is a band that, at least for me, like, I don't know that they've ever had an album that I would consider, less than like an 8 or an 8.5 out of 10. Like, that's how consistent this band has been. So I feel like the bar is high, when an album comes out and your expectations are high. I had mentioned offline that, like, I immediately think that it's better than the last Nightwish album. And I think that Epic has kind of taken Nightwish's place as the measuring stick for symphonic metal. I just think, as far as consistency goes. But yeah, this is, I think, going to be one of those things where I'm glad it came out earlier in the year, because I'll have the rest of the year to really dig into it some more and see if my enjoyment levels continue to grow the more I listen to it. But it's definitely going to be one of those albums that I'm plan on going back to probably more than others. So I know it's like, even after 2 listens, it's on my list. It's just I would have expected it to catapult like right to the top after 1 or 2 listens, and it's not quite there yet, or maybe it won't ever be. We'll see. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
I think that's fair. I'm hoping to see them in just a couple of weeks here in New York City when they do that short run of shows, probably in advance to the larger North American tour. So I do think that some of these songs could be really good live. And it's not like I didn't enjoy the album. Don't get me wrong. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It just didn't like knock my socks off and blow me out of the water. And that might be because I heard some other things this week, which kind of did. And that always could be part of it as well. I listened to Epica, I think 3 times so far. I need to give it some space, give it some room to breathe. But 2 albums that I am going to strongly recommend folks check out. One of them actually referred to us during our Patreon monthly chat that we have with a bunch of our Patreon members. This was a band that I was intimately familiar with. I have all of their old albums, but I didn't realize that after 17 years since their last release, they had come out with new music. So I was familiar with the band, not the new album after all this time. And the band is a German prog act called Everon, and the new album is called Shells. And I immediately loved this disc, and that doesn't happen. Usually it's the second listen which really grabs me, but from the first listen, this album really just blew me away. And I am going to go back to this again as early as tomorrow, just because I'm so curious to listen to it again. I want to listen to it with headphones. I want to listen to it in the car. I am just going to go back to this disc a lot. I don't know, if it's going to be on the end of the year list or where it's going to place or anything like that. It's too premature, but it knocked me. It was a home run out of the box, and I don't often say that. So that is definitely something to check out. And then going stateside, another band that hadn't released an album in well over a decade. The band is called Empyrean Sanctum. The album is called Detachment from Reality. They're a prog metal act out of the Chicago area. They sent us a promo. I didn't even know they were recording. I thought it was like one of those one and done things from, around 2012 or something like that. And then the new album hits, and it's kind of like this mix between like a modern Queensryche sound with some other modern prog bands thrown in, but they stick to the I don't know, that classic prog sound from like the late 80s, early 90s, and fuse it with some of the newer players in the genre. And I just thought it was really well done. 9 tracks in all, and each one just sounded very different than the next, but all within that same like chunky guitars, really cool keyboards, and some really soaring vocals. And I was just thoroughly impressed by this release. So again, the band is called Empyrean Sanctum. The album is called Detachment from Reality. I'll post the track this week. I definitely think it's worth people's time.
Nice. I need to check both out. I wasn't familiar with either of them, but that's what I have you for.
Well said. And an album that I was surprisingly not familiar with, or as familiar as I probably should have been, was this second solo album from Luca Turilli. So Rhapsody is kind of hitting its stride at this point. It's 2002. Luca Turilli has released his first solo album, King of the Nordic Twilight, in 1999. You can go back into the archives and listen to our long-form discussion about that album. And 3 years later, on November 26th of 2002, Prophet of the Last Eclipse comes out. And I say I should have been more familiar with it because I will just put it out there at the start. When I listened to this thing, I think I remembered 2 tracks. The rest was like hearing it for the first time. And I had, in my mind, kind of written this album off as just something less than the debut, but markedly better than his third solo album, which I truly just did not care for. That was The Infinite Wonders of Creation from 2006. I need to go back and listen to that as well. I have zero recollection of that album except thinking to myself, I don't like this, and never going back to it. So
I'm with you 100% on that one, by the way. I don't know. I couldn't think of one song from it, honestly.
So that is something we should probably cover, even if we don't like it, because I think it probably deserves another listen, but that's a story for another day.
We haven't panned anything in a while, so.
Yeah, there you go. So I think that if memory serves, that does probably deserve some of that. But This was an album that, for any multitude of reasons, and I have 2 theories, never really clicked for me. And it was nice to go back and listen to it on repeat all week. And I think my opinion has changed quite a bit, although I'm not going to say it's nearly as good as the first album. I think that there was a little bit of a drop-off, but that debut album was one of my favorite in the genre, let alone by Luca or something like that. What made you pick it this week? Just curious, and we'll start with that.
So, I had been adding albums to a playlist on my iTunes of stuff that I just wanted to get to at some point, and this made it onto that list, and I just kept going back to it, and like the more and more I listened to it, I was like, man, I really forgot how good this album is, and so I kind of pushed it up to the top of the playlist, and it just a little inside baseball. This is the same playlist I use to listen to the albums that we're going to cover. So it was literally following the Persephone album that we covered last week in the playlist. So Persephone would end, Prophet of the Last Eclipse would start, and I would just find myself unable to turn it off. And so by the time it was time to make a choice, I was just like, yeah, this is really what I really want to talk about. I am fairly certain this was one of the discs that I purchased at Prog Power 3 when I, would get the actually that might not be true because the album might not have been out yet. So I kind of, maybe I might be thinking of the first Dionysus album, which also featured Olaf Hayer on vocals. I know I own the CD. I can't put my finger on where it came from because it was released on November 26th. And when was Prog Power 3? It was probably pretty close.
It might have been that weekend. Like it was like a really close in time, or it's possible they had an advance copy there. I just don't remember.
Yeah, I feel like I would have gotten it. I don't know. It just feels like I would have gotten it at that Prog Power. Don't ask me why. That was November 15th and 16th, 2002. So yeah, I mean, it is possible that they got, it's happened before where the vendors have sold albums a week or two before they were officially released. So I'm just going to guess that's where I got it. I honestly don't remember. But anyway, there was a whole stack of, I remember me, you, and Mike just having each a stack of CDs, just kind of picking up some of the newer stuff we haven't gotten to yet, stuff that was recommended to us, stuff that, for me, there were like albums from, I remember getting Damnation Game by Symphony X, was an album I never actually owned. And someone was selling it for like $10. So I was like, oh yeah, let me fill in my back catalog with Symphony X. So I remember some of the albums that I for sure bought at that Prog Power. I think I bought Angra's Rebirth album and had it signed by the band. Same with, I think, Gamma Ray's No World Order. These are all albums that would have come out around that time. So yeah, I think that I think I bought Silent Force's second album. It's also starting to come back to me. This feels like it's around the same time. But anyway, I had mentioned last week that like I remember it's kind of the earlier days of the internet, not quite like 1996 dial up, downloading song. I guess one song that takes 25 minutes, but it's still early to mid 2020 or 2002, I should say. And the track Prince of Starlight was really just kind of put online early. It wasn't a single. It just was like a pre-release almost. I remember Avantasia did something similar with like a minute and a half of Reach Out for the Light. It was like just a little taste of what's to come. And in this case, I remember they released the entire song Prince of Starlight, and I was like agog. I was like, this is so good. Like, cause I loved that first solo album. I gave it a 9.0 when we reviewed it. And I was like, this is awesome. And it feels like it's a little bit of a departure from more of the like Rhapsody style, medieval kind of vibe. And this has more of like a sci-fi futuristic vibe to it, but with that same sense of the songwriting sensibility that Luca Turilli, one of my all-time favorite, songwriters in metal. So I was excited. I feel like it's not as much of a hit you over the head great album like King of the Nordic Twilight was, but I think the more and more you really listen to it and dig into it, I think it's a little bit more dense. There's a little bit more happening. And I haven't decided exactly what score I'm going to give it yet, but I consider it a very close peer to the first album.
That's interesting. And like I said, I never did, but much like Symphony of Enchanted Land for Rhapsody, you could hear that the second Luca album, much like the second Rhapsody album, took things to the next level, just in terms of the songwriting, arguably the production. And I definitely hear what you're saying about the sci-fi vibe with a lot of like spacey keys and stuff like that. And one of the things I wanted to put out front was the mix on this is interesting because the guitars are kind of further back in the mix. They don't hit you over the head like they do on some of the Rhapsody tracks. The the keys are really prominent throughout this album. And I thought that was interesting because Luca obviously known for his guitar playing, and yet he doesn't really show off as much on this disc as I think he did on the first album.
I think that's fair. Yeah. Keyboards brought to you by Miro, now back to being called his original name of Rusev, or otherwise known as Michael Rodenberg, who we've mentioned before on this podcast, because he's worked as a keyboard player and producer for Angra and Shaman and Rhapsody and Camelot and Heaven's Gate, which other than Shaman, I think are all bands we've done at least one episode a piece on. So yeah, and I guess just filling out the rest of the lineup, Robert Huneke Rizzo, who I believe was the drummer on the first Luca solo album. I will double check. Yes, he was. This is actually the exact same lineup. Sasha Paith on bass, and presumably he produced this album as well.
He did. He did.
Olaf Ayer, as mentioned earlier, on vocals. Luca on lead guitar. Some interesting, if you dig into the credits, there's some fun little notes in here. Herbie Langens as part of the choir, as well as Amanda Somerville. So some names that I think would come to more prominence after this. Those are at least two that I recognized. That's kind of a little intro just to the lineup at the time. Yeah, Sasha and Miro both produced this. I think I'd mentioned it last week. Like, this kind of is around the end of my first, love of metal period of my life where it was starting to wane. And I think a lot of that had to do with being in college and just being around a lot of people that didn't listen to metal. And so you just kind of like drift towards what you hear sort of thing. My friend Matt always appreciated like the really fun power metal type stuff. I remember he was like San Sebastian by Sonata Arctica was one of his favorite songs. I would go through his music on his on the network in our dorm, and I would find like these tracks that I know he had to lift from me, because like where the hell would he have heard like a track from Michael Kisk's second solo album or whatever, like and I would be so excited to see that he like listened to it and enjoyed it. I remember Time Stands Still by the Iron Hill was on there. I was like, yeah, Matt, like hell yeah, dude. So he loved Ancient Forest of Elves. I remember that. So he was a fan of Luca Turilli, but I again, like I was kind of almost like holding on for dear life with metal. Like, I went to Prog Power for the first time around this time, but as we've mentioned, like I kind of lost touch with it around like 2003, 2004 for a few years. And really it all kind of revolves around attending Prog Power. It's like going to Prog Power, like lights up your love for metal. And that's how I felt going back to Prog Power in 2009. And then all of a sudden I'm like digging into back catalogs and catching up on all the shit that I missed for like 5 years or whatever. And that I think I'm still trying to catch up on those 5 years. Like, thank God for this podcast. But yeah, this is one of those albums that towards the end of that time that I remember it, because it's almost like that last string of physical albums that I remember buying before I kind of went digital. This was definitely the last Luca Turilli CD that I ever purchased. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback off that. I think I said kind of up front there was at least a pair of reasons I think that I didn't care for this album so much at the time. One of them was that I think I was really just kind of full on prog at this point, at least not that I wasn't listening to power metal. I still enjoyed my Halloweens and some of the newer bands that were coming out around the turn of the century. But at the same time, when as I was listening to this album in 2002, I was also heavily involved in Pain of Salvation and stuff like that. And this just didn't grab me like some of those albums did around this time. So I think timing was part of it. The other part of it was, I guess, I don't want to say it was the mix, but I remember hearing Demon Heart at or about the time that the album came out as a single or something like that. And I never liked the song. And I think it jaded my appearance, like my ability to appreciate the rest of the album, because to this day, I remember Demon Heart and still I don't care for the song that much. But the rest of the album is actually much better, in my opinion, than that song. And that I just didn't remember. And the first one or two times that I listened to the album this week, I said to myself, yeah, I can see why I just, album's not for me. And then the third time I played it, I tried something different. And I don't know why I did this, but I tried something different. I am in the middle of a 1-month free trial of Apple Music. I just wanted to try it out. I wanted to hear what the higher sound quality was going to be like, and it was a free trial. So instead of playing it off my Plex server with basically my CD rip of the album, I decided to play like the lossless version on Apple Music. And I started hearing things for the first time in my life that I never heard on this album. And it goes back to those spacey keyboards that to me just popped because of the mix or because of whatever however they uploaded this album, it sounded great. And all of a sudden, I went from like, I still don't care for the album after 2 listens to like, oh my God, this is really good. And I have to say, credit to Apple, because it just sounded so much better for me when I listened through that channel as opposed to using it on my own Plex server, which is normally how I listen to music. So by the third listen, I did have a bit of an epiphany here, and it got me really excited to talk about it.
Awesome. I'm glad, because I would have been really sad if this was like kind of a meh experience for you.
Yeah, definitely more than that. So it took a while, but we got there. So let's get into it. The album kicks off with about a 2-minute intro called Enigma. And those spacey keyboards are really there at the outset. It almost reminds me of like Star One. With some of those keyboard patches, but this one has a bit of a techno vibe to it, with a kind of an operatic Rhapsody chorus type of thing that they do. An interesting start to the album. I'm not sure that I'm going to say it's my favorite intro of all time or any adulation like that, but it's a curious intro that goes right into War of the Universe, which no lag, no break, just right into the track. And I know that you've always kind of parlayed those first two tracks on albums, the intro track and the first album track proper. Here, if you didn't do that, you'd have no idea that it was two separate tracks, because that's how seamless the integration is to War of the Universe. That one is really orchestration heavy at the start, and the vocals finally kick in with that first verse. And you can already tell it's just more diverse in many ways than the first album. The chorus is kind of standard fare, but catchy. And I think Olaf Hayer's vocals are just really good on this song and on the album in particular, just better than I remember. But War of the Universe, and this is a theme throughout the album, those keyboards really make the sound come to life. And the guitars on a song like this are just further down in the mix when you take the solo out of it. But a good start to the album for sure.
Yeah, first of all, one of the first things I noticed is that you have an intro track that's not sang in Latin, which was like every Rhapsody intro. I think at this point, Rhapsody has at least their first three albums. I can't remember if the fourth full-length album was out by this point in time. Power of the Dragon Flame came out the same year. That came out in March. So that would have been out. So yeah, like this actually has it's a similar vibe. It's a very orchestral heavy symphonic intro, but like you said, with these kind of futuristic keyboards mixed in and with actually English lyrics, which is kind of a nice change of pace. And I do actually have these two tracks joined as one. I think I ripped them that way because a great option iTunes has when you rip an album is that you can choose to join the tracks as part of the rip. So like, it's easy. It does it for you, and there's literally no space in between. It's seamless. So just shy of 2 minutes, and then this War of the Universe kicks in, and my God, this song is incredible. I'm just gonna right off the bat make it my song of the week.
Wow.
It's just such a great song. The way that the song starts, it's just like, here we go. Like it's a perfect intro to kind of, it's the typical Rhapsody formula where it's, all majestic and mid-tempo, and then all of a sudden, like, it just explodes into a fast-paced power metal song. The chorus is super catchy and memorable. The verses are just so good. Olaf Hayer, it's a shame from what I understand, like he blew out his voice, but he had such a unique voice. And when I first heard that first Luca Turilli album, it was so cool to hear something a little bit different from Fabio. He's a totally different vocalist, and it gives this totally its own flavor without sounding too derivative of Rhapsody. But I absolutely love this song. It just has everything. The solos, all the things I love about power metal. There's a lot of songs I really like on this album, but this one just has always been my favorite, and it still is. There's these... It makes me laugh. This happens. You'll get this more than once on this disc, but they have like these. It's like a children's chorus, and it reminds me of the end of the Phantom Menace, the first Star Wars prequel, where they're all celebrating on Naboo, and you hear like children, like a children's chorus singing, and it's interesting because I don't remember that being used, at least very prominently, on the first Luca Turilli album, but it seems to be kind of a trope on this one, and they do it in this one too. But I think just the chorus of the song kind of puts it over the edge for me. I think it's so good. It's kind of sucks to make your song of the week the very first song, because it's like, where do you go from here? But it's just that good to me. So, and I'm glad you didn't choose it, because I'm really, really curious to see what you did choose, and that way we're not blowing our wad on the very first first track. So let's give War of the Universe a quick listen, and we'll come back and move on. Without space, we're swallowed into the concept time. Systems burning and colliding from the chaos, dark and light. Microscopic blazing thunder, segments of the divine ball. War of the universe, of cosmic energies, of phantoms riding the genesis of all. Sons of the universe, forever fighting through every age, come down to face this long, holy
That was Luca Turilli's War of the Universe, Chris's Song of the Week. As we roll on to Rider of the Astral Fire, this one is another one that's kind of orchestration heavy at the start. It reminds me more of a standard kind of Rhapsody tune. I think the drums are really, really good. They stand out to me, and there's some underrated bass lines on this song too, which are nice. I actually prefer this to War of the Universe. There's something about those very melodic, soaring vocals on this track, which really were a pleasure to listen to. It has a bit of a cheesy chorus, I guess, but it's very, very catchy. And the keys almost have like a video game-like quality to them. I thought this was going to be your Song of the Week, or at least in contention, but I guess you took the mystery out of it by going with War of the Universe.
Sorry, I ruined it for everyone. I've mentioned this on past Rhapsody and Luca Turilli episodes, but these albums tend to have like just a really killer track 3. Track 1's always the intro. Track 2 is always the opening face melter, and then track 3 is always kind of like the underrated follow up. Legendary Tales had Rage of the Winter, Symphony of Enchant Lands had Wisdom of the Kings, Dawn of Victory had Triumph for My Magic Steel, and the first Luca album had Legend of Steel. These are all some of my all-time favorite power metal songs, and they're all in that three track slot. And this is just another track that I think is just really obviously not in your opinion, but I mean, I feel like it could have gotten overwhelmed by the previous track or just, but it's also totally different sounding, and I think that makes it stand out. And there's plenty of these like these cosmic futuristic keyboard patches that you hear that are unlike anything that you would have heard on the first Luca album or any of the Rhapsody albums up to this point. It was really interesting to hear this style of music that had always been medieval and Baroque sounding at its roots, like go completely into like the Star Wars, or whatever you want to call it. Like I think the Wikipedia entry said that Luca loved science fiction films, and Event Horizon in particular was one of his favorites. And so I'm guessing that played some sort of, role in inspiring this album. But another really great track, and I like that it has a different vibe from War of the Universe. It has those like childlike choruses or whatever. It's a really good track. It's a fine follow up, and we're off and running here. Just everything up to this point has been great, at least for me.
It's an interesting way to follow up these two tracks with an instrumental track. Zephyr Sky's theme. I guess having not known the album nearly as well as you did, I wasn't going to say it was jarring. It wasn't. It was actually kind of well placed, but it was unexpected. And I want to hear your description of this, because this has a kind of a mysterious quality to this song.
Yeah, it's there's kind of a similar segue track on the previous Luca album, but it's a bit further further into the proceedings, it proceeds Where Heroes Lie, and it's called Throne of Ice, and it's kind of like a very dramatic and operatic, like really emotional type of track. This one's a bit longer. This is actually kind of feels more like a full-length song than like an intro. So yeah, I mean, it's really just very heavily orchestral, but it kind of it has less of that kind of futuristic quality to it, so it almost feels a bit more of a throwback to the first album. But yeah, I think it's well placed. It kind of gives you a break after like two pretty heavy hitting tracks before we get to the Age of Mystic Ice. But yeah, a solid instrumental track just to kind of reset things, I would say.
I really liked the last minute where there's this, what sounds almost like a trombone that gives way to this piano outro. I just thought the ending of this track was really, really cool before we get to the Age of Mystic Ice. Not that it's a bad instrumental throughout, but the last minute was really memorable, I think, in my opinion. But as I said, the Age of Mystic Ice is the next proper track.
And I should mention, I do believe the female vocals are Ranveig Sif Sigurdar Dottir, which I probably said just as poorly in the last episode, but I just remember her from that first Luca album, and she also did work. She did vocals on Shaman's Ritual album and Camelot's Fourth Legacy and some After Forever albums. So
it might also be Amanda Somerville as well. I think that she is credited potentially with the backing vocals on this, the choral track on the background type of thing.
Okay, yeah, that could be it too. I think we will hear Ranveig later on. This is back when like you didn't get as many details on things as like nowadays. You go to Metal Archives and it's like track for track will tell you who sings guests on each thing. So I apologize if that was not correct. Also,
no, all
another thing I noticed too is that on Metal Archives, it says it has a November 11th release date. So it is very possible that it was out by the time Prog Power rolled around, especially because they were selling a ton of European discs. I can't even imagine this was released in the US when it first came out, because this is still at a time. I don't
think so.
Yeah, this is still at a time where that's just not normal, I guess, or usual.
Nice. I again, it's memory's a little bit foggy, information a little bit all over the place, but definitely in that month, to say the least. I think that the Age of Mystic Ice, you can immediately tell that this was a banger. Very much in the Camelot vein. I heard a lot of Camelot, and I almost think that if Olaf Heyer had been singing on the Black Halo, this is the type of track you would have gotten. The chorus really picks up with that double bass drum and that galloping feel to it. Maybe one of, if not my favorite chorus on the album, and it's probably one of my favorite songs on the album. Really like the instrumental section, especially with the keys and the bass. Not my song of the week, interestingly enough, but a very good tune.
Very nice. Another really strong chorus. Luca Turilli just was at this time was, I think, one of the very best power metal songwriters that was out there. Like, the guy just could write a hook. And the fact that he could play guitar, better than most of his peers, it really just made for, this was like, at least for me, like it married my love of symphonic and orchestral music with my love for Halloween, esque power metal. That was why I fell in love with Rhapsody when I first heard them. And this, these first two Luca albums, I put right up there with any of those early Rhapsody albums too. And credit to Luca for making them feel different, or different enough anyway, that you can kind of put them to the side and treat them as like their own kind of thing. And also having like totally different musicians, I think helps too. Good stuff. I wish Luca was still writing power metal songs because he's so good at it. But he seems to have moved on to more like classical and piano type stuff. There's some tracks on iTunes of just like little piano numbers, like real classical style piano numbers that he's done. So, and I've even asked, like, I've asked this for him to come on the podcast, and he's just kind of like, very gracious, but he's like he's not really into talking about stuff that he did before. Like, he's like very, very,
he wants to move on.
Yeah, he's very present day oriented, which I can respect. And he didn't even need to respond, which he did, and he did. So it would have been a pleasure to speak to him, but all good. But yeah, another strong track. I like this one a lot. This is one that I feel like I may have kind of forgotten about, just because it's wedged in between like two of my favorite songs on the album, with War of the Universe and then the next track, Prince of the Starlight. But this is another really solid tune. And I agree with you. It's a really good chorus. So yeah, so far so good.
So you mentioned Prince of the Starlight. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this one. You said the last one was kind of wedged in between. I have to assume that you're a big fan of this one.
Yeah, this would probably be my runner-up for sure. I have such fond memories of it being the first song from the album that I heard, and again, like it's got like this really almost like fake out intro where it's like this really majestic intro, and then it's kind of like fades out, and then it kicks in like kind of a lot like War of the Universe did, where it's just like, oh, by the way, we're about to go, ape shit. And this is just another one of those tracks where it's just like, as much as I love everything Luca and Rhapsody do, the full blast, fast paced, power metal, like face melting type songs are always my favorite. And that's why this and War of the Universe are probably my two favorite songs on the album. But it's just super, super melodic. And it's like everything I've already said about every other track. Just catchy-ass chorus, catchy-ass verses, super fast, like keyboards, like just everything. Like, I love this song so much. And I will always just have this fond memory of having it like in my Winamp on my computer, and and it being the only thing for a while that I could listen to from this album because it wasn't out yet. So it may have spoiled me for a lot of the rest of the album, and maybe that's why I didn't. It took me years to really appreciate this album as much as I do now, and that might be part of the reason why. But curious to hear your thoughts.
I really like this track. I think it's my favorite on the album. It's a song where the riff really stands out. And I haven't said that to this point on the album. As I said, the guitar work's been a little bit subdued, but I think the riff here is great. I love how the keys kind of mirror the riffs on this song, which is really, really interesting to me. And there's got some nice piano interludes throughout. It almost reminds me of Beethoven's Last Night from TSO, just in the way that they have those little piano interludes. The chorus is a real earworm, and I'm surprised that I forgot about this track because it stands out amongst the rest. It was my runner-up for Song of the Week, and I even got some Ancient Forest of Elves vibes in spots on this song. Very, very good, but it's not my Song of the Week. And neither is Timeless Oceans, the next track. This one's another change of pace. It's another ballad or a ballady type of track with woodwinds and these kind of subdued vocals. It almost sounds like a different singer when Olaf is in the lower register. His ability to be almost like a chameleon with the way he disguises or changes his voice is incredible. And this, I think, is a perfect example. Even when the orchestration picks up on this track, it never loses that ballady feel to it. And I have to say, it's not his best ballad, but it's a good song.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. I think that I forgot what the ballad was on the previous album. I guess it would have been, I think there was two. Princess Aurora was one of them, and I guess Warrior's Pride. I think that those tracks might be a little bit better than this one, but it's still very good. It's a very orchestral heavy track, and again, I think it kind of strays a bit from the futuristic vibe, and it's kind of more of like, I think Rhapsody would do more of this going forward, like when Christopher Lee would start doing narrations and stuff. They did, especially with Fabio, where he would do more of his operatic style than his power metal style. This feels almost like it's a prelude to that, but just very emotional, very it really builds and builds. And I agree with you. I think Olaf does a really nice job on this one. But I feel like the album kind of could use a slower, something to kind of slow things down, and it kind of the rest of the album I think has a lot more upbeat type stuff to finish things out. But I feel like this album needed a track like this.
Yeah, it breaks it up for sure. And I was not shy or mincing words earlier when I talked about my distaste for Demon Heart. Listen, it's not the worst song in the world, but it's just not my favorite. And it's probably my least favorite song on the album. And I don't know why it didn't grab me, because there are elements of this thing that I really should enjoy. And it does hit kind of hard after a ballad, because it really kind of pops in contrast. But it's just not as good as some of the other songs that we've talked about, at least in my opinion. And although it's memorable, it's kind of memorable for the wrong reasons. And it's really because of how the title of the song is overused throughout the course of the song. And I do appreciate the contrast between the verses and the chorus. It's just not my favorite chorus, and I find it to be just a very pedestrian tune.
Do you like it better when Andre Matos sings it?
Yes, I do, but not enough to push it up push it up for me. I thought it was interesting because I'm a Matos fanboy, but even there, I just don't think the song is that good. And I was shocked that they would have him kind of do a guest spot on one of the bonus tracks with him singing vocals, because I would have rather have heard him sing on just about any other track. Yeah,
well, it probably because there was an EP/single for this.
Yeah.
I will say, like, I think that I'm kind of in agreement with you. It's not one of my favorite songs on the album. It's kind of towards the bottom for me as well. But it doesn't sound like anything I've ever heard Luca or Rhapsody do up to this point. I think it's a really unique sounding song. It was the only song from this album that Luca Turilli's Rhapsody played when we saw them at that big headline show at Prague Power, their first U.S. show, which is kind of a bummer because there's so many other tracks from this album I would have loved to have heard live. I don't know if they felt like it had more of a commercial vibe to it. I guess it kind of does. I think that the verses are better than the chorus. I don't dislike this song, but I'm with you. It's one of my least favorite songs on the album, but also I really like the album, so it's not really too much of a negative strike. It's just I just never loved it. And I'll be honest with you, there's some bonus tracks and B-sides that blow this track out of the water, and we'll get to that.
I could not agree more there. I could not agree more. If Jen was choosing her song of the week, she would have chosen New Century's Tarantella. And I say that because I had it on in the car. And she's like, wow, what is this? And she was just kind of like enamored with this whole concept when she first heard it. And I think it was the woodwinds more so than anything else. It does have a dance-like quality to it. So the song is certainly aptly named. And it's interesting how the woodwinds just kind of lead this song with guitars and drums behind them. It's interesting, to say the least. Not my favorite, but interesting. The verses have a bit of an Ailstorm quality to them, especially with the accordion and some of the drum patterns that they use. The chorus is a lot more traditional, certainly has a majestic feel to it. Just a very interesting composition.
This is probably like the track that like I most forgot about and was like, geez, like what a great song. Like, how did I forget about this? Like just super catchy chorus. Like you said, the instrumentation is really good. There's so many just cool instruments. And that whole like first like minute of the song, the that I don't know if it's like a pan flute or what, but that alongside the drums and the electric guitar, it makes for such a cool, unique sound, like unlike really anything I can remember hearing. Definitely agree on the kind of like piratey Elstorm kind of vibe with the kind of, accordion like, sounds or whatever. But yeah, this is a like really kind of fun track, and I think that it kind of is needed after Demon Heart, which is kind of like you said, we both kind of, songs we didn't really love. And so this one, I think, kind of puts a little more pep in the step of the album before we sign off on this big, God forbid Luca and Rhapsody don't finish an album with a big long ass track. This album is no exception with Prophet of the Last Eclipse, the title track. But give New Century's Tarantella a listen. It's a fun ass tune and probably something that a lot of people forgot about.
Yeah, I certainly did. And the last track here, it's funny because every song here, for the most part, is between 4 minutes, 5 minutes long. And then sure enough, nearly 12 minutes with the title track. Certainly an epic end. This song is all over the place. It has... The start is really just this chanting chorus. And when I say chorus, I don't mean like the chorus of the song. I just mean like a group of musicians that are singing together in a chanty way. Very keyboard driven and very much an over the top type of thing. It was a lot to digest here. Not bad, just a lot. The intro goes on for about 3.5 minutes before you start hearing vocals, but the verses are excellent. They're catchy. They're upbeat. I like the backing vocals. And honestly, I like the verses even better than the chorus on this thing. The keyboard sounds throughout are really good, especially during the instrumental sections. And then it has this really wacky ending where it's just like a bunch of random noises, Gregorian chants. And then I don't even know how to describe this track. It's just so different and almost feels out of place on the album. But the more I listened to it, the more I grew to appreciate it. It's just different and kind of wacky.
I wish they played this live because I just feel like it would have been fun to hear live. I guess you'd need to have like an actual like choir singing. I have to laugh because like I assume they're saying mortis in Latin, like mortis or mortis, but I swear to God, I hear more cheese every time he says it. And it's like, I just picture like a bunch of Italians like waiting in line at the cheese store. Like, I'm going to need some mozzarella, some ricotta, and some provolone, more cheese. But levity aside, yeah, this track is truly all over the place, but I think it kind of takes all the best qualities of Luca's songwriting and arrangements and stuff and makes it into like this big, long epic. I don't think it flows quite as well as the title track on the previous album that they did play live at Prague Power, and that was insane. I remember marking out getting to hear that track. But this is really good too, and just a really, epic way to kind of ride things out as, Luca Turilli is wont to do at the end of his solo albums and Rhapsody albums and stuff like that. And but it definitely pulls back that kind of cosmic futuristic sound, and it's way back in full force on this track. And so it's interesting. I really wonder if like people who loved that first album and those, Rhapsody albums that were out at that time were like hoping for something that was more, medieval / Baroque, like that style, and not as, spacey. But I think it kind of makes for a nice dichotomy between those two albums that really set them apart from one another. My understanding is that storyline wise, I don't think there's any connection, and the story was supposed to be continued, but it never was. So I'm not super aware of this story, and unfortunately all of my discs are in storage, so I can't pull out the old booklet like the old days. So but yeah, definitely you get those Ron Vig or Amanda Somerville vocals, in this song. There's just like, this really does have a little bit of everything. Then it ends.
Yeah, it ends. But you mentioned it earlier. There are a lot of bonus tracks, both not only on the disc but on the EP, the Demon Heart EP as well, that I think we should go into at least in some detail. The first bonus track being Dark Comet's Reign. This is a really good song. Great keys again. And the chorus has a nice chug to it, and it kind of maintains that same melody that you find in the verses that precede them. This song could have easily been on the album. You could have thrown it on anywhere, and I think it would have fit very well. A very good track in its own right. And the other album bonus track was that Demon Heart version with Andre Matos, which is certainly better, but it's kind of lipstick on a pig in my opinion.
Yeah, this was like one of those early albums that had like all these different versions, and there was even a vinyl edition that had tracks that weren't available elsewhere. These two tracks we're going to talk about now were on the limited edition version of the album, and looks like there was like a digibook edition that Lim came out with that had these two tracks as bonus tracks, and they were not part of the Demon Heart EP /single, so you'd have to have gotten the special edition or whatever. Based on the lyrics, it sounds like Dark Comet's Reign was supposed to be part of the story, because in the lyrics to The Age of Mystic Ice, they make reference to Dark Comet, which is a fallen ship, apparently, in the story. So it would have been in there somewhere. And I agree with you. Like, I feel like this really could have been on the album. I don't think anybody would have batted an eye. Maybe they just felt like, maybe too much of a good thing is too much. But this is, I feel like, one of the best B-side / bonus tracks I've ever heard a band have. Like, it's kind of shocking that it's not part of the album. It's that good.
I don't disagree at all. And there's a bunch of others, so I'm going to let you do the honors. Why don't you just kind of tell me which ones you want to talk about, or what order you want to talk about them in? Because I have some thoughts on a lot of these.
Yeah, I'll briefly mention the Demon Heart version with Matos. Like, this is not like a duet or anything. This is straight up Matos singing the whole track. I remember the first time I heard it seemed so out of place to me. Like, why the hell is Andre Matos singing this song? But it's pretty cool hearing him sing. Just to hear him sing another song, like hearing Andre Matos sing is just nice. So it doesn't make the song any better or worse, like you said, but it is cool to hear him do it. It feels incredibly weird and random, but it's worth checking out if you've never heard it. The two tracks that came out on the vinyl edition were Caprice in A minor, which is an instrumental. Essentially, it's a guitar solo, very Yngwie Malmsteen-esque. It's really just kind of a electric guitar version of a classical piece, and it's just really a showcase of Luca's expert guitar playing. Not really much else to say beyond that. Do you have any thoughts on that one?
No, believe it or not, I've never heard this or Autumn's Last Whisper, which are on the vinyl version, because I don't have the vinyl version of this album. I'm actually going to make a point of trying to pick these tracks up if I can find them. So that's my homework assignment for the week.
Yeah. Autumn's Last Whisper is another this kind of, I think, feels more like a Night King of the Nordic Twilight track. It has more of that Baroque kind of feel to it, with the harpsichord and everything. And this one is actually sung entirely by, I think Ronveig is doing the vocals here. I'm all in my head now, whether it's her or Amanda Somerville, but I think actually the Wikipedia page says that this track is Ronveig. So it's kind of cool to hear some female vocals. And as a matter of fact, that album we were discussing earlier, the third Luca album, I believe Olaf does like split duty with a different female singer, and then Luca also had like a side project called. Do we remember what it was called? Luca Turilli's Dream Quest, and that was another weird album that I don't remember enjoying very much, and I'd like to go back and listen to that again. And that one is completely done with a female vocalist who goes by the name of Mist, who is actually a gospel singer from New York, of all things.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she actually did backing vocals for Epica and Rhapsody and even Avantasia's Moonglow album. So kind of a cool connection there. I'm wondering if she also was the singer on the Infinite Wonders of Creation. Yes, she was, as a matter of fact. So it'll be interesting to talk about those two albums in the future at some point. So yeah, nice little track. Definitely, I think, is a B-side quality track. Like, I don't know where it would have fit in on the album, or if it even was meant to. It really feels kind of more like a Rhapsody song in a lot of ways, but another track worth hearing.
Nice. And then there's obviously the Demon Heart B-sides as well, some of which we've talked about, some of which are edits of some other songs, and then one or two, we'll call them new songs. You want to talk about those as well?
Surely. Rondo in C minor is not terribly different from Caprice in A minor in that it really is just a classical piece set to. Well, this actually is not like a electric guitar song. This is another.
No, this is classical piano through and through.
Yeah, with the harpsichord and all that. It's a very medieval sounding track, but it's cool because I feel like it makes for this really cool. It feels like an intro to Black Realm's Majesty, because that track, like Rondo in C minor, ends with the harpsichord, and Black Realm's Majesty starts with the harpsichord, except the harpsichord did a couple of lines first and is now very excited to be here. This is arguably one of the best songs that we talked about on this entire recording. How the hell did this track get left off of an album? It's fantastic.
If you notice, I haven't picked the song of the week yet.
Oh shit! Yeah, you're right.
And the reason I haven't picked the song of the week yet is because we haven't talked about Black Realm's Majesty. Black Realm's Majesty is my song of the week. This track has no business being on an EP. Let's give it a listen, and then I'll come back with the rest of my thoughts. This is Black Realm's Majesty by Luca Turilli. So that was Black Realm's Majesty, a song that is so good that there's just no business having this buried on the back of an EP for a song that's not very good in the first place, as I mentioned earlier. This one blew me away. I love the keyboard intro. The rest of the band jumps in. It's got this very neoclassical feel to it. I love the high vocals at the start. The verses are fantastic. They're heavy. They're melodic. It's the perfect blend of the two. The chorus is really good, too, with the layered vocals. And then there's female vocals on the bridge. I don't know who sings it, but it's the same singer from the first album. So I guess it's, for whatever it's worth, it was vocals that I definitely recognized. And then you have a great instrumental section with a great guitar solo. It is a short journey that makes you just want to ride it again and again and again. This track is fantastic, and every time I listen to it, I said this is better than anything that's on the album.
It's so odd. Like I feel like between this and Dark Comet's Reign, you have two like A-level tracks that easily could have been on the album, and they're not like out of sync with the rest of the music. Like it fits. I mean, Black Realm's Majesty's a little bit, I think, with the harpsichord has a little bit more of a vibe from the first Luca album, but man, this is good enough to be on an album, like on an album proper. And there's probably so many people that have never heard this track, and so I'm glad that you chose it because it'll give people a chance to hear it. Because it's like probably one of the most underrated songs in power metal. Really great tune, and it's part of like you said, the Demon Heart EP. Along with Demon Heart itself, there's an edit of the long Prophet of the Last Eclipse track that pares it down to about 4.5 minutes. Then these two tracks we just discussed. There's an edit of King of the Nordic Twilight as well, and then finally we'll end on this. There's a Halloween cover on here, and it's from an album that we haven't discussed yet, the Keepers of Jericho Halloween tribute album. And Luca Turilli provided a cover of "I'm Alive." Your thoughts on this cover?
So we did cover the second part of that Keeper of that Halloween tribute, but we never covered the first. And this is obviously on that first album. This is a great cover, great Halloween song. Not going to say it's better than the original because the original is just one of the all-time classic power metal tunes, but this is really well done. It's catchy. I like the keyboards because, again, you don't really hear that as much on a lot of the Halloween recordings. And Olaf Hayer is one of the few guys that can pull off Michael Kiske, or at least he could at this point. So a good cover.
I always liked that this version kind of sprinkled in some symphonic elements that weren't in the original track. There was a time where I might have said this was better than the original just because the production's way better. I mean, it's the song came out over 10 years later, well over, maybe like closer to 15 years later. But just the flourishes that really make it feel Luca Turilli-esque, I think really put it over the top. It's one of the best covers of a Halloween track on an album full of them. And we're going to cover that album at some point in the future. It's probably the most loaded tribute album as far as the band's paying tribute. It's like unreal. And it's hilarious because it's got like Labyrinth, Vision Divine, Luca Turilli, and Rhapsody, like all tangentially connected in one way or another, all on there. And then you throw in Sonata Arctica and Secret Sphere and Dark Moor. Like it is batshit good. As good as that second one is, the second one's awesome, but like a lot of the bands are really lesser known, and then this first one was like an all-star team of bands. I think Brainstorm was on there. Like it's crazy. But anyway, this track was also available on the Demon Heart EP, and so that pretty much covers all 17 or so tracks that were recorded during this time. I love that you chose a B-side for your song of the week. You're now in the B-side club. I think I did that when we covered Holy Land, which I'm surprised I didn't get more hate mail for. But this was a treat. I was looking forward all week to talking about this with you. So I'm glad you enjoyed it more than you thought you were going to.
Yeah, like I said, by that third listen, I came around on it. This is a better than average record for sure. I don't like it as much as the debut, which I gave an 8.5. I do prefer that album. There's some clunkier tunes on here which bring it down for me, but it's still above average and thoroughly enjoyable, especially when I got to listen to it on Apple Music. So I'm going to give it a 7.5. I thought it was very, very good. Had you asked me what I was going to give it earlier in the week or before we recorded, I might have said it was going to be a 7 or a 6.5. So it was definitely better. And I'm glad I got to listen to it because I just completely forgot about this thing. I have to assume that you are well into the 8s, maybe even the 9 territory on this.
I gave the first Luca album a 9. I'm going to give this one just a slightly lower rating of an 8.75. I think that the Demon Heart hurts it a little bit. I think that while there are some songs on here that may be better than anything on the first album, I think the first album is just more consistent start to finish, but this is not a slouch by any means, and it's one of my favorite of the entire Rhapsody Luca Turilli spectrum of albums, and I'm really glad we got to talk about it. I was just super stoked. So yeah, I can cross that one off the list of the long ass list that every time I cross one off, it's after I just added 4 more. So shouldn't have trouble picking anything going forward, but this was fun, and I hope if there's other people who may have passed on this album or hadn't heard some of these really cool bonus tracks and B-sides, that it gets them to give it another listen and check it out again, because I think there's a lot of good stuff on here worth listening to.
Beautiful. And before we talk about next week's album, just a few news tidbits from alums of the podcast. That is to say, bands we've covered in the past. First and foremost, Fear Factory going back into the studio with their first recording in 4 years. I know a lot of fans of this band are still out there. We covered Demanufacture a number of years ago now, but Fear Factory going back into the studio, that's something I'll check out when it comes out. Sabaton has signed with Better Noise Music. Their new single is going to be out by the time that this is released to the public. Our Patreon members will be getting this just before the release of the single. The single is going to be called Templars. So obviously excited to hear new music from Sabaton. And in conjunction with their Prog Power appearance on September 4th, Vola has announced a full-fledged North American tour for this September. They're actually starting the tour a day earlier than Prog Power, starting in Nashville on September 3rd, doing it's got to be well over 25 shows, ending in West Hollywood, California at the Roxy on September 28th. I am really looking forward to seeing that band again, so that will certainly be fun. Do you want to tell everyone what we are covering next week? Because this is something that we're entering virgin territory here. I am really curious to hear what this is going to sound like.
Yeah, glad to hear Vola's doing more shows. I would have been happy to see them. They're playing in Durham, but they're playing the day after they play at Prog Power, and I'll still be at Prog Power, so I'll just have to see them in Atlanta, which I was planning on doing anyway. Yes, next week our friend Chris Calabrese or Calabrese, we're gonna have a chat with him and see if he prefers the super Italian version of it or what. I don't know. I want to say Calabrese, but I'm a paisan, so he has chosen a band that I'm not sure we've ever even mentioned. Maybe up until last week, I think you mentioned them, but up until last week, I don't think we ever mentioned this band before. And so I'm very curious. And I forgot, this is actually requested by another Chris as well, our friend Chris Willenbrock. So the two Chris's have come together to request this album, and I will be reaching out to both of them for their thoughts on it. But the album is Lights, Camera, Revolution, and the band is Suicidal Tendencies. I got to be honest with you, I don't know a damn thing about this band, so this is going to be tomorrow. I'm going to listen to the album for the first time, but this is new territory for me, so it should be interesting. But apparently, this was an album that current Metallica bassist Robert Trujillo was a part of. So
yeah, I know nothing about. The only connection I have to Suicidal Tendencies is that when Robert joined Metallica, I knew he was in this band, but then I never checked them out. So I have no idea what this is going to sound like. They call them crossover thrash, so I expect it to be a thrash album. Not really sure what crossover means, but we're going to figure it out this week, and we'll get back to you next week and talk all things suicidal tendencies. Thanks to everyone for listening. We appreciate you. Thanks especially to our Patreon members for helping be the foundation of this podcast. This is going to be fun. I have a couple of things in store in the coming weeks and months with albums that are celebrating some anniversaries and things that I've just wanted to cover for a long time. So we trek on as we forge ahead into 2025. I hope you enjoy the week. I hope you enjoy this album, and I look forward to connecting with you again when we talk about suicidal tendencies next week.
I definitely would recommend, if you haven't, check out our Patreon page, see if it's something that interests you, and see if some of the bonus stuff is something you'd be interested in being a part of. And to quote a couple of songs from Suicidal Tendencies, you can't bring me down if you send me your money.
And to that end, I'm going to go get whacked. I will see you next week.
Have a good one, my friend.